Amen. L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim.
Amen.
Get ready. Purim is in 1 week. Next week, we will not be having a class because it will be Purim. We will be celebrating. Moshe, you're going to come join us here, right? Talking to your wife through you. You have a non-speaking part? Is that your role? You're a husband. You don't have a speaking role.
People over. She invites us over to other people.
Okay, l'chaim, folks. So it's good to prepare. Say a l'chaim, so you're well prepared for the holiday. To not to know the difference between blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman. What that means is a good question. How could you not know the difference? You should really get so shikr. What's going on over here? Okay. So, to celebrate, we've got a bunch of mitzvahs to do. We give out matanas of yonim to two poor people on the day. We give tzedakah. I collect and give out to poor in Israel and poor locally here in Montreal. Make sure it gets to their hands on the holiday, on Purim itself. You have to do it Purim day. That means next Sunday during the day. Unless you're living in Jerusalem or a walled city in the times of when Joshua conquered Israel, if it was walled city way back then you celebrate on Monday, the following day, giving the tzedakah then to two poor people. You also give two different edibles to a friend, mishloach manos, to bring out the idea of friendship, community, connection. And we also make a mishta, a festive meal, right? You make hamotzi, you wash, you make hamotzi, you have good foods. Here we're going to have wonderful food, catered beautiful meal. And of course, you need to hear the Megillah. Both at night and day. That's a unique mitzvah. The only mitzvah you have by night, Saturday night after Shabbos, is to hear the Megillah. Otherwise, all the other mitzvahs, including hearing the Megillah a second time, is during the day. And of course, in the prayers, you say the prayer Al Anisim, which is to remember, of course, the holiday in our prayers. So that's the basic holiday. Now, why do we celebrate on the 14th? It's because on the 13th, we were busy in a battle. We were battling. All our enemies. And Baruch Hashem, not one Jew got killed. In battling on the 13th of Adar, and therefore we rested on the 14th. We celebrate on the 14th, right? In Shushan, though, the decree was the following day on the 14th. So they battled on the 14th, and they rested and celebrated on the 15th. So all walled cities, and the only walled city that we know of today is Jerusalem, that they celebrate the following day. So you have a lot of people that they go out who live in Jerusalem, they leave Jerusalem, and so that way they have to celebrate on the 14th because they're not in Jerusalem. And then they go back to Jerusalem, or the opposite. If they live in, they live in Bat Yam or live in Haifa or Beersheba, so they celebrate there. And then the following day, go up to Jerusalem, and they get a 2-day holiday, right?
Rabbi,
yes.
In the previously it was Shushan. Right now it's Hamadan in Iran, and they celebrate Purim
on the 15th.
On the 15th, yes.
On the 15th,
yes.
Because that's the city of Shushan today, Hamadan.
Yes. Hamadan,
oh,
yes.
Okay. We've got a descendant from from Persia. With us here. Okay, thank you. Okay. So then how does it come out? The 14th, which is next Sunday, Saturday night, Sunday, 15th, which is Monday. So that's the 2 days, shall we say, right? But if we look at the Mishnah, in Mishnah Megillah, and it's actually the very first Mishnah in the first chapter of Megillah. Let us go there. See something intriguing. What is that? Not there. Okay. Oops, no. There we go. This is the first Mishnah. And let Diane in, thank you. Okay. It says Megillah can be read on the 11th of Adar, on the 12th, on the 13th, or on the 14th, and on the 15th, not earlier and not later. Cities that were surrounded by walls since the day of Joshua, the son of Nun, read the Megillah on the 15th, like we mentioned, right? Villages and unwalled cities read it on the 14th. However, villagers advance their reading to the earliest market day. How so? If the 14th falls on a Monday, the Megillah is read on the day that the village, on the day in the villages and unwalled cities, and on the next day in walled cities. So they'll read it on the 14th and on the 15th next day in walled city. If the 14th falls on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, the Megillah is read in the previous market day. Back in the day, market days were Mondays and Thursdays, right? So they read on the market day, which is if the 14th fell out on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, so then you precede it and you go to the previous market day, which, right, and on that day in large cities and on the following day in walled cities. If the 14th falls on Thursday, the Megillah is read on the day in the villages and unwalled cities and the next day in walled cities. So then it would be the same. It wouldn't change. It would be just those 2 days. If the 14th falls on Friday, the Megillah is read on the previous market day, right, which would be the 13th, right? So Thursday in villages, and on the in villages, on the day of unwalled cities, and the following day, unwalled cities. Huh? No, that would be Shabbos. I think that something didn't add up there. No, Thursday, yeah, right. And the following day on Friday, right. In other words, the 14th. Yeah. So it would be the 13th, 14th. So if it falls out on a Wednesday, so then you go 2 days earlier, right? Which would be on the 12th, you would read it. Because if it's not Thursday, it fell out on a Wednesday, so you go 2 days earlier. The 14th is on Wednesday, so you can't read it on a Wednesday because it's not a market day, right? It's not a market day. So they would go back not to Tuesday because it's not a market day. They would go back to Monday, a market day. So on the 12th, it would be read. Is that clear? Right? And walled cities, they would read it still on the 15th.
Regardless.
Huh?
Regardless of.
Sorry, and then on the following day on walled cities, so it would be on the Tuesday. No, Monday would be, right? It would be Monday, Tuesday. Then it would be Monday, Tuesday in such a, right? Got it?
Yes.
Is that clear? Okay. So you need to read the Megillah with a minion, preferably. That's one thing, right? Secondly, Megillah, you need to read it from a scroll. Most villagers did not have a scroll. That was a very expensive item, right? And therefore, since the routine days that the villagers would come in, as we'll learn more about that later, they would then bring it forward, right, to the market days on Mondays and Thursdays, right? So the sages made this allowance. And we see that no other festivals are like that at all, right? The day of the festival is the day of the festival. But here, that's not the case, right? And it's not a substitute day. It's not considered a substitute day. It's considered the day for your reading of the Megillah, right? It de facto becomes, not the full Purim celebration, because the Purims are the other mitzvahs that we mentioned. You do that in the 14th and the 15th. But reading the Megillah, the whole Megillah, right? The story. So, and by night and by day, it is then the appropriate time. So it comes out that the holiday then is celebrated 11th, 12th, 13th for villagers who read it early. Let's see the Talmud, what it explains. Talmud says, all of these dates were established by men of the Great Assembly when the festival of Purim was first established. They had instituted Purim only on the 14th and 15th of Adar. The sages of later generations had they only done it on the 14th, 15th, the sages of later generations would not have been permitted to add to those dates. For the law states that a court may not uproot a ruling of a previous court unless they are greater in wisdom or number. It is thus obvious that all these were originally established by men of great assembly. Oh, okay. Where is this implied in the book of Esther? Rabbi Shimon the son of Abba said that the name of Rabbi Yochanan to observe these days of Purim in their times. So it's plural, their times. So therefore, the sages originally instituted it, that there's a time period, not a time or the time, but times for the reading of the Megillah. So we don't look that the villagers or those from the unwalled city that came and read it a day or two earlier as a substitute. We're seeing it as the way it was originally set up, that this is the proper way to do it, right? That's how it was originally set up. And with this, we can understand the whole Mishnah begins. How did it begin, the whole Mishnah of Megillah? The Megillah is read the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. Didn't say the Megillah should be read on the 14th and 15th, right? And if you can't read on those days, then read on 11th, 12th, and 13th. It doesn't say that. It says clearly it's read on these days as if it's equalizing the 14th and 15th is no greater than the 11th, 12th, and 13th. You follow? From the very wording of the Mishnah, we see that that's very clear. So in other words, the men of the Great Assembly, when they instituted the holiday to begin with, this is how they instituted it.
Of equal weightage.
Of equal weight, exactly. Yeah. That clear. And we see now also contemporary ruling about this. Those who have embarked upon a sea voyage or joined a caravan to cross the desert on the 14th of Adar and do not have a Megillah to take along should read the Megillah on the 13th, the 12th, or the 11th. However, they should omit the blessings that are customarily recited before the reading. So we see that today this also applies, right? Now, again, the other mitzvahs you do on the 14th in an unwalled city, and in a walled city, you do that on the following day on the 15th. But the story of the Megillah, right? So the question is obviously, this is very unique. We don't see this in any other holiday, that if you have a difficulty because of something of that holiday, so therefore, change, you have a leeway in the celebration of the holiday, right? We do have a precedent, though, of a makeup date. What is that? Korban Pesach, right? The Paschal Lamb offering that is offered on the 14th of Nisan. If you were distant from the Holy Temple or you were impure and you were not able to, then you can do it in the following month on the 14th of Iyar, right? Called Pesach Sheni. So the concept of a makeup date is in the Torah. But this concept that we're talking about over here, there's not a makeup date, which intuitively, that's what it sounds like. The 14th is when they rested. The 15th is when they rested. Those are the dates to celebrate. That's when you read the story. No, what are we saying? That the 11th, 12th, and 13th, 14th, and 15th, as the Mishnah says, it puts them all parallel, comparable one to the other, are all part of the holiday. How do we understand that?
So the story is more important than the dates.
Then the story is more important than date, right?
Because you can say it in love.
But that being so, the sages didn't have to give a leniency here. And they could have just said, well, 14th, whenever that 14th is, whatever, right?
It's tied to the market.
They tied it to the market. It's not tied to the market. The sages tied it to the market, right?
But then no other holidays tied to the market.
No other holidays tied to the market. Exactly.
The sages knew.
Tied to the market.
They had Ruach HaKodesh, the sages, right? They knew that, okay, maybe on the 14th, there's going to be a program here in somewhere in Poland, and they can't read it that day. So they knew that. No, I'm serious. I mean, they knew that.
Okay, but well, one second. But we're bringing it. We're preceding and doing it, not afterwards, right?
I know.
We're not doing it after. So, anyways, it's still, we need to understand there isn't a precedent for this idea, right? So, we need to understand why would they break with the traditional way that the Torah speaks about. If at best Torah gives us a second opportunity after. You missed that date, right? So afterwards, right? But hey, this is the date that you should do it and finished, right? Now,
Pesach Sheni, meaning the second Pesach.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which means a second Paschal Lamb offering. That's what it means. Doesn't mean the holiday that, doesn't mean the holiday of making a Seder. It means the holiday of bringing the Paschal Lamb offering in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. Yes, that's what it means, right? So now, of course, the sages did it this way because in the Megillah itself, it said plural days of the holiday. But that itself also needs to be understood because that is the sages themselves who wrote this. Right? So it's just backing up the question, but it's still the same question. Why would they make it? Because we said it wasn't something instituted later. It was originally instituted into the holiday based on the verse that we see it in the verse. The verse says, right? But that itself is the question. The sages wrote it, right? As we will speak about now. Is that clear? We're good? Everybody out in yonder land clear? We're good? Hey, I don't see. Oh, a thumbs up, anyone? We got Chava's thumb. Everybody's got a yellow thumb. It's pretty interesting. You're thinking like a green thumb or something, but yellow thumb. Okay. All right, at least you got a thumb. Thumbs up for the thumbs. All righty. So we're going to understand this by first exploring something else about Purim. Some interesting surprises for everyone here. You ready for some surprises? Yeah? Okay. Let's begin. So the holiday Purim, believe it or not, the sages themselves never intended to establish a holiday. Imagine ripping us out from Purim. Like, Adalayada, like, festive time. They did not. It was only because of Queen Esther and her insistence to make the holiday, actually together with Mordechai, truth be said, on this one. Let's take a look. The Megillah. In the Talmud Megillah, it says, Esther sent word to the sages, establish my festival for posterity. Right? The sages sent word to Esther, it would provoke the ire of the nations against us. Esther sent a word in return, I'm already written up in the royal annals of Madai in Persia, in Pras. Yeah. The sages didn't have an intention to make a festival out of this. Not from the 14th, not the 15th, let alone 11, 12, 13. Right? Why? Why?
Because it was a time of like
We
threat
were-
to the Jewish people.
We were still in exile. We were still Akati Avdi da Achashverosh Hanan. We were still servants of Achashverosh. Yes, we won the battle. Yes, we weren't annihilated, but didn't have our freedom. We still lived in Persia. We were still in exile. It was some years later that Queen Esther's son, Darius, that gave permission that we could build the second holy temple, and then you had the second Beis Hamikdash with Ezra coming back and bringing people back to Jerusalem. But that was, decades later.
Rabbi Darius or Cyrus the Great? King Cyrus, I think.
Or maybe it was
From where? From Babylon?
From Persia.
Yeah, from
Yeah.
Persia, that was Cyrus.
Cyrus. Okay. No, I think it was Darius. No, Darius gave the permission. It was Cyrus that then it was built. He gave the first permission. And it was under Cyrus, then it became Cyrus after that. I think that's what it was, if I recall correctly. And anyway, someone gave permission. That's not even the point. The point is that they were still in exile. They were still in Babylon, right? They were still servants under Achashverosh, under his rule. So the sages were concerned. Well, you're going to make a festival when we're not in our own land, our own people. You're going to make a festival, that might not work out well for us. But she assured that, hey, I'm already written in the books over here. I'm already, I am. The story is, not just me, but the story is. So if the festival was never meant to be, according to the sages, right? That means the whole holiday is very tenuous. It's like, holding by a string, if you will. But yet we see something that's a complete paradox. And what is that? Talmud tells us the following. All of the festivals will become null in the Messianic era, but the days of Purim will never be annulled. Oh. So what does it mean all the festivals be null? Doesn't mean literally that we won't celebrate Pesach and Shavuos, but their light, their influence in our lives will be null and void compared to daily existence in times of Mashiach. Now we need these holidays. They give us a breath of air. They give us a breath of life. They give us, fortitude to move forward all the holidays. But in times of Mashiach, presence of God will be so palpable that it'll be like a candle on a sunny day. Doesn't give that much light. So it's not going to be null and void in the sense of it won't be celebrated, but it won't be the hoo-ha that it is today, because every day will be that hoo-ha, except for Purim. What do we see here? That Purim is going to be a special date even then. In other words, it's got something, right? A holiness on that day that was never intended to be. That's the paradox. It wasn't even intended to be a holiday. And yet it will be the holiday of all holidays when Mashiach comes. It will endure. That's taking what we say, something that is the ordinary of all holidays, and it becomes extraordinary. Clear? Let's go a step further. Megillah Esther. That's the festival of the holiday, meaning celebrating it. How about the Megillas Esther, the writing of the story that is on a parchment that is now part of Tanakh. So likewise, we have the same thing here. What happened? Esther sent word to the sages, write me up for posterity. She says. The sages sent back a message, is written, indeed, I wrote for you in 3 parts, it says in Proverbs. In the Torah, a story may appear 3 times, but not 4 times. A story in Torah can appear 3 times, but not 4 times. What does that mean over here? Esther wanted this story to be written up, right? Canonized and be part of the 24 books of Tanakh. Sages said, well, I'm sorry, this story has been told already 3 times. What story? Who's this a story with? Who is Haman? Haman Agagi. He's from Agag. He is an Amaleki. The story of Amalek we have in Parshas we have in Sefer Shmos. We just had it in Parshas Kisisa. And we will have it again in Deuteronomy. We'll have it in Parshas Kiseitse. We'll have it. And it's also in the book of Shmuel with King Saul when he did not destroy Agag, the king of the Amalekis. So a story in Torah, because it's going to be canonized in Torah, can only be told 3 times. We have it 3 times. So therefore, this is the 4th, sorry, sages said. It doesn't fit the parameters of a story that needs to be retold. Right. There's a different message, new message, and so on.
What is it?
Everything.
Being retold?
But as everything, this was brought to the Sanhedrin, right? The Sanhedrin dealt with this, right? It was brought to the Sanhedrin. As a matter of fact, Mordechai did not make this request. The previous one he did. This one not. This was only Esther. There's a whole sicha, separate sicha from the Rebbe explaining the difference, why. But not for now. He didn't. He sat on the Sanhedrin and ruled upon it, together with the other 70 sages, 71 sages who were in the Sanhedrin. And in the end, they came up and said yes. Why? It's because in Kiseitse, right, in Deuteronomy, in Devarim, it does speak about it, but it's not a narrative. It's only depicting what already occurred previously. So it's only like a recap of the previous incident that we had in Parshas Bashalach, actually. I'm sorry, it's Parshas, what did I say? Kisisa. Parshas Bashalach, we had it, right? Before when? The end of Parshas Bashalach, right before Parshas Yisro, which was the giving of the Torah. That's where the battle was, right? And then when it was at length, Moshe putting up his hands. It was a whole. You remember the narrative? Hur and Aaron were holding up his hands, and then when his hands were up, they would be victorious. Who went out in battle was Yoshua, right, and so on and so forth, right? In Deuteronomy, it's like recapping the previous story. So the sages then, through their discussion and debate, said, oh, it's really only 2 times we have it. The one in Deuteronomy is not a narrative. It's not telling a story. So the principle of that we only tell a story 3 times was not fulfilled. So therefore we can write it. Got it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You look uncertain.
Well,
Based on the principle. Huh?
I guess I could have misinformation. It's not in the Torah.
The what? No, it's not in the Torah. It's Tanakh. Nach. It's in Ksuvim. It's part of the Torah. It's not in the 5 books of Moses. It's in the writings. Like Tehillim is part of the Ktuvim, right? Of the writings. Right? Mishlei, yeah, it came after, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's clear now? So what does this suggest then? that the Megillas Esther, of all the 24 books, you would think it's kind of weak then. It's also tenuous. No, it was a debate. Is it a narrative that needs to be told? That the basic narrative has been told already, and we don't repeat it. So it's holding by a string, right? A debate is in Deuteronomy and Kiseitse. Is that, include, not included, right? In the end, they said it's not included, but it's somewhat tenuous. But if we look further, it says all the books of the prophets, this is Rambam, all the books of the prophets, Ksuvim, will be nullified in the Messianic era, except for the book of Esther. It will endure like the 5 books of Moses and like the oral laws that were transmitted by Moshe, they will never become null. So here we see another paradox. On the one hand, it was so questionable of it being even written. And at the end, it's going to be the book that will remain together with Chumash, together with the oral Torah. Now, when it means over here, again, it doesn't mean nullified. Well, it will be nullified. It means like this. Our understanding of it now, compared to what we will have it then, will be nullified. In other words, then it'll be null, and it'll be what we know now is nothing compared to what we will know of it then. Right? And that's why, because the prophets is, but the Megillah, we have a sense of it now. It's got, it's enduring as is. In other words, it's still a message then. In other words, the message of Tanakh will be not the way we even understand it today. It'll be re-understood, so to speak, in a deeper way, more profound way. But the message of the Megillah is so enduring that it will endure that message from today till then. Right? Is that clear?
Yes.
Again, a paradox. The final paradox, it's not the final paradox, but the last one will, is the holiday called Purim. Purim is called because of the word poor, not because people were poor, didn't have money, but it's a Persian word for lottery. Haman threw lots to determine the day to destroy the Jewish people, right? So if the name of the festival is meant to convey its miracle, then why not call it its Hebrew word, Goral, right? Why the Persian term, which is pagan people? And so why do we give it a Persian name, which demonstrates Haman's pagan poor, which in the end became a Goral? So to make more clear the question, let's look at the Alter Rebbe. He writes upon the results of the lottery appear to be random, not rooted in reason. However, in truth, lotteries are determined by God in a manner that transcends all reason. When you follow reason, you are free to make intellectual choices. When you throw lots, you suspend intelligent choices and place yourself at the mercy of the lottery, even if the results defy reason. This means that you throw your lot in with the divine supernal will that transcends reason. That sounds reasonable. Therefore, they called these days Purim, a cognate of pur, plural, which means Goral. Haman's pur, an attempt to co-opt God's blessing in defiance of all reason through a lottery, failed. God's transcendental will did not defy reason in support of the impure Haman. Rather, it supported the Jews who merited through their utter self-abnegation, self-sacrifice, jeopardizing their lives for the one God. The primary joy of Purim is that Haman's pur dissolved and the transcendental divine will focused exclusively on the Jews. So again, the theme of Purim is revealed over here. In other words, we have a pagan name, right? Bringing out, the Haman's intent. In the end, that intent was foiled, and we came on top. God didn't support his throw of the die, but was there in support of the Jew, right? So the poor ends up triggering a goral that God chooses us. So again, we have the paradox over here, right? That on the one hand, it sounds like it's something, a negative thing, but through that negative thing, ultimately it becomes something positive for the Jewish people, right?
Rabbi,
Yes.
does it mean that the word poor is mocking the lottery of Haman? Am I right or am I wrong?
No, it's mocking it. I don't know if I would use the word mocking. It is, it's taking that which he had an intent to annihilate us, and that was dissolved and became that God showed us favor. So so what you have over here in the same thing that has, a possibility of negativity, it becomes the conduit for the positive, right? So maybe we could put it up in different words. In all of these instances, we have over here a Persian name, which is ordinary, right? The written Megillah, that seems to be an ordinary. In other words, it's nothing extraordinary in the way it was initially perceived. Even the festival itself was deemed just be an ordinary day. No festival to be made. From that became something extraordinary, right? That's how you could sum up all of the examples that we just gave. From something ordinary comes something is latent in there, the power of something extraordinary. So the poor, which is, well, ordinary in a negative sense, right, comes out extraordinary in the transcendent will of God. In the writing of the book, the Megillah rather, right, that is seemingly appearing to be, it's ordinary. What, a fourth time? Right? It's a story that we know. It's a story we've been there. We have to repeat the story. It's an ordinary story. But in the end, no, it becomes extraordinary. Right? And even the festival itself, that it should be celebrated, the sages said, well, not really. It's ordinary. I mean, okay, there is something special, but they looked at it as ordinary. And, if it was so extraordinary, then of course you got to make a festival. But because it's ordinary, in a sense, we are not going to make it into, sorry, it is ordinary festival because not everybody was on board full of fire that we got to do this, right? There's some trepidation, but it becomes extraordinary in the fact that when Mashiach comes, this festival will remain in significance. The book will remain in significance, and the festival will remain in significance. So it becomes extraordinary. Okay. Yeah. With this, let's go back now to the three types of cities that celebrate Purim. Remember, we started off that we celebrate the holiday on the 11th, 12th, 13th, which is preceding days. And it seems from the Mishnah pretty clear, and how the Talmud learns it, and how we're learning it over here, that these are not additional days, right? In other words, a second-rate way to fulfill the mitzvah, but it is first-rate, even though even though that, intuitively we wouldn't think that way. So we have three things. We have walled cities, we have unwalled cities, and we have villages. Okay? Walled cities, they're secured fortresses, right? The inhabitants over there don't need to worry about, tomorrow you wake up and will you be seized by another nation, right? My wife and I went to in Ottawa to the Museum of Civilization there, and they were showing Canada for 300 years ago till today, and it was so unreal that how 300 years ago, only 300 years ago, and even less than that you went to sleep at night, you didn't know if you'd wake up alive, or if you were alive, maybe you were going to be caught by some other group of bandits or group of,
Or after the next.
yeah. It wasn't even wars. It was just like it wasn't like even wars. It was just a takeover, of a village or of a, whatever, right? It wasn't, right? I'm saying, but that was how you lived, right? In the fear of not knowing, right? But if you lived in a walled city, you were surrounded by mighty walls. You had guard towers, and you had, guards there. So you didn't worry about external threats so much. And you could devote your energies to domestic development, right? And those were the capital cities back in the days, right? They became the centers of culture. They became the center of commerce and, the governing ministries and so on and so forth. That's what it was, right? Now, those walled cities were not independent nation states. Why? Because they had to depend on others, on unwalled cities in the villages for their supplies, right? The villages had the natural resources. They would produce the grain, the meat, the fish, the eggs and the cloth, the wood and metals, and so on and so forth, right?
And the Homitage.
Huh?
And the Homitage.
Of course, right? That was the villagers. And then you had in the unwalled cities, there you had tradespeople, right? They weren't working the ground. They were tradespeople doing different other kinds of, they were the garment factories, if you will, back in the day, whatever so-called factories they had, right? Built furniture and so on and so forth. And the walled cities, they didn't have the natural resources for this. They didn't have the capability. So they were dependent on the unwalled cities and on the villages. Correct, Demon? That clear? All right. So that's it in a physical sense, the reality, right? Mm-hmm. Everything in the physical comes from spiritual. Exactly. So we need to understand what does it mean in spiritual terms. So, Sicha from the Rebbe. People who lived in walled cities can devote themselves completely to God. Their spiritual disposition is like an enclosed fortress that shields them from the unsavory influences of temptation. The spiritual task of people in outlying cities is to be surrounded by worldly temptation and nevertheless use their worldly resources for holy purposes. Thus, they create a city, a home for God. They don't need to plow, plant, and wait until crops grow. They can just take pre-prepared, ready-made resources and turn them into a home, a city for God. Villagers, on the other hand, that's the third category, right? Must plow and soften the hardened soil, the corporeal world, which God is not visible, to make it sprout and grow. So, the capital walled city, you have the people of high society. Spiritually, that means people who are on a high level, they're spiritual, they're connecting, they are safeguarded by their walls that protect them from all of the temptations that might be of a lowly concern, right? That's who they are. They focus on godliness. They strengthen their spiritual connection. The unwalled cities, they're aware of godliness, but that's not their mainstay, right? So they come to a Torah class, right, like we do, right? They come to a Torah class and they learn and they know about what it means, the love of God and the awesomeness of God, but it's not their primary preoccupation, right? And therefore they have reverence for great holy people, and they are engaged in what? World activity. And from that world activity, they know that through what they're doing, they're making a home for God. They're taking the material of this world and making it a home for God. Exactly what we started today in Tanya, chapter 36. Exactly today's Tanya, right? Finally, we have the farmers. They're simple. They live off the land. Their hands are soiled with the earth. They have to patiently wait till things grow, right? They have to wait. Not like the unwalled city dweller, right? Because they have the raw materials. It's much easier for them to produce something, right? Meaning it's much easier for them to produce a connection to God because they understand, they have a feeling, they have an awareness, right? They're not like the righteous in the walled city, but they have something. But here we're talking about simple folk, right? They tend to the cattle, but in the end, they have to feed the world's population, right? They're not sophisticated. They're not cultured. They're not holy people, right? Meaning they're not a Jew that has a strong mind and understanding, appreciation of Torah. They don't have a very strong in their heart feeling the presence of God and so on, right? But they're loyal, simple soldiers in the army of God. They're honest, good, hard-working people who are loyal to Hashem. Villagers do not have keen perception of God. Again, this is all a metaphor, right? Obviously, you can have a villager who can be a Torah scholar. You have that many times. They're Torah scholars, right? They're villagers. Yeah, right? It was a simple, came from simple, right? So we're using this as a way of a metaphor, right? So that's very important not to get caught up in that. Yeah, but I remember a villager that, such a good guy, and he was a Torah scholar. Okay. He was faking being a villager. He lived in the walled city. Villagers do not have a keen perception of God. They don't relate to God intellectually or emotionally. Their relationship is marked primarily by obedience. Nevertheless, their self-abnegation is complete. In fact, the surrender to God driven by simple loyalty is greater and deeper in some ways than the surrender of those who enjoy a rich intellectual or emotional relationship with God. Wow, that's powerful. In other words, just do it, right? Being that simpleton, right? Being that simple person who's obedient. This is what you got to do, and you do it. You don't have a great intellectual awareness. You don't have great feelings in your heart of, wow, how awesome this mitzvah is. But yet you're committed to it like a soldier. Like a soldier, right? With this now we can understand something unique about the dates of Purim. Remember we said that the walled cities, they celebrate on 15th, unwalled on the 14th, right?
Yes.
But it's only the villagers who have a large selection of dates for them, specifically because of them, right? Villagers can transform the other days of Purim, the 11th, 12th, and 13th, that are ordinary days, into extraordinary days and make it the festival of Purim. Right? That's what's the reality. Because of them, they can take the ordinary and make it extraordinary. The ones in the walled cities can. They're limited, right? Unwalled cities are limited. But the villagers living in villages, because of them, right? So on the ground is because, we're talking about they didn't have a day, it wasn't the market day. So for them, for them to travel was a challenge, right? That's on the simple level. The deeper spiritual level is no, they are actually have something more profound about them. They're able to take it ordinary and make it extraordinary. The 14th and the 15th are extraordinary because those are the days of celebration, because that's when it happened, in fact, right? Those are days of celebration. That's when it happened. So those are days that are celebrated, right? That's the power of Purim. It takes the villager, right? And with that we can understand how the whole Megillah doesn't have God's name mentioned at all, right? Like the villager is a simpleton. Doesn't sense the presence of God, but yet is committed fully and wholly to Hashem. The one in the walled city, meaning the righteous person, right? The presence of God is very palpable in their lives. They've walled off all negative influences. They can't, the negative influences can't touch that person, right? Because they've transformed the evil inclination, the animal soul within them. So they don't have to deal with that. But the one who is attached to the walled city, the outside of it, the unwalled city, their struggle. So they do have their struggles, but yet, they're attached to the walled city. And, they are more connected. Are also limited in what they can celebrate. They can only take the extraordinary and have it extraordinary. But it's a simpleton, simple villager who is not sophisticated, might be very ordinary in their service. When you look at them, you don't see anything extraordinary in them. You look at a righteous person, you sense the extraordinary in them. And you look at this person, ordinary. And yet, no, they're obedient. They do what they got to do just because. That's what a Jew does. That's something very beautiful and grandeur about that. We have a Yom, beautiful thought of the day for the 16th of Iyar following. In terms of scholarships and aptitude, the Chassid Rabbi Abeler was a simple man. Once when he had a private audience with my grandfather, Tzemach Tzedek, who's the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, right? My grandfather said to him, this is Rebbe Rashab speaking about his grandfather, Elia, I envy you. Imagine it. Tzaddik says, right? Our Rebbe says, I envy you. You travel to various fairs, you meet many people. Sometimes during a business transaction, you get into a warm discussion about a Jewish aphorism, a Talmudic moral, etc. And you arouse that person's interest in studying the exoteric and the esoteric dimensions of the Torah. This causes joy on high, and God pays you commission with blessings of children, health, and sustenance. The larger the fair, the more work there is, and the greater the commission earned. What's the commission earned? Is that he's going to have more, better family life, more nachas from his children. That's it. Right? And health, and even livelihood. So he's jealous of him because he goes to the fair, and there he speaks to the people, right? And from one thing to another. The same thing if if you engage with a person and you speak to them a word of Torah, or you speak to them about doing a mitzvah, right? That's a beautiful, beautiful quest, right? What are we doing? We're taking an ordinary occasion and making it extraordinary. And that's what God wants from us. We're simple folk, we're ordinary folk, right? But when we recognize that what's before us is an opportunity to do something extraordinary that is beloved on high and is more treasured even to such a degree as therefore the 11th, 12th, and 13th that are ordinary become extraordinary. And that's who we are. We're simple villagers who are in the end extraordinary. We do extraordinary things. We're not extraordinary. Ordinary. We do extraordinary things. That's who we are. L'chaim.
Fine.
Any questions? Any comments?
The village of
Huh?
the village of Copenhagen.
Montreal, the village Montreal.
In the history of Montreal, there was a Copenhagen, which is a separate town.
Uh-huh.
To go all the way up over the mountain. To get
Uh-huh. Couldn't go around it.
a horse-drawn carriage. Up and around.
There you go. All right, folks. Thank you for
Alright, thank you
joining.
so
God
much.
bless.
Thank you so much.
Afreilach Purim. So next Sunday there won't be a class for maybe we'll make the class Monday night instead. Monday night or Tuesday night. Figure that out next week because next week is Purim. All right, get ready. Celebrate.